You have noticed you are a slightly different person around one specific person, a little quieter about what you believe, a little looser with what you would normally not do. Nothing dramatic, nothing you could point at and call a sin, but your prayer life is thinner than it was 6 months ago, and you cannot fully explain why. Paul gives one blunt warning about the company we keep, and how he opens it matters. Do not be deceived, he says. Bad company ruins good character. Do not be deceived. That phrase tells you the mechanism. This is not something you feel while it is happening. And notice where he says it. He is in the middle of defending the resurrection, arguing against people who were quietly talking the church out of what it believed. So the company he was worried about was not people with bad manners. It was ordinary conversation that was slowly moving a church's convictions. So here are 7 signs, with one thing said clearly before we start. This is not about deciding who is evil. You can be genuinely loved by someone who is genuinely bad for your obedience, and both of those can be true at the same time. And one bad conversation is not a pattern. We are watching direction over months, not moods over a weekend. The first sign is that obedience starts to feel embarrassing around them. Nobody argues with your theology. They just make holding it slightly expensive. A pause, a half smile, the joke about how seriously you take this. And you find yourself trimming, not because you were convinced, but because you were tired of the cost. Paul says something revealing about himself here. If I were still trying to please man, he writes, I would not be a servant of Christ. Still, he is admitting there was a version of him that did. So this is not a rare weakness. Conviction rarely dies in an argument. It dies from being smirked at. Second, they normalize the exact thing God has been telling you to put down. There is a king in Scripture who shows you how this works. Rehoboam had a decision to make, and he asked the elders who had served his father. They gave him wise counsel. Then he went and asked the young men he had grown up with, and he took their answer instead. It cost him most of a kingdom. He was not short on wisdom. He was short on distance from the wrong voices. And notice that nobody had to talk him into anything. They only had to agree with what he already wanted. That is what normalizing sounds like. Not temptation, reassurance. Everybody does this. You are overthinking it. God is not that strict. And it works because it arrives from someone you like, in a tone that sounds like relief. Third, and this is the most reliable one, you are spiritually colder afterward. The first psalm traces the whole path in one verse, and the verbs are the point. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the way of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. Walk, stand, sit. Motion slowing down at every step. Nobody sits down on the first day. You walk past, then you linger, then you have a seat, and the seat the psalm names is the mocker's chair. That is where the drift ends up. So here is the practical test, and it has nothing to do with how you feel about the person. Look at the 24 hours after. Do you pray, or do you avoid praying? Is Scripture more appealing or slightly irritating? Are you more honest with your spouse or less? Your walk with God is the instrument panel. Read it instead of arguing with it. Fourth, they treat your limits as an insult and call the pressure love. Paul uses a farming picture for this that gets misread constantly. Do not be unequally yoked, he says. Paul's immediate warning is about being bound to unbelief, but the image still helps us recognize what happens when two directions are tied together. The law behind that image forbade plowing with an ox and a donkey harnessed together. The reason was never that one animal was wicked. They pull at different strengths and different speeds, so the furrow comes out crooked and both animals get hurt. That is the honest version of this. Some people are not evil. They simply cannot walk at the pace you have been called to walk, and being bound to them turns your obedience into a constant negotiation. You are commanded to love everyone. You were never commanded to give everyone the same seat at your table. A person who cannot hear a small no from you is telling you something about the size of the next request. Fifth, you are being pulled toward keeping things from the people who love you. Jesus said that whoever does evil hates the light and will not come to the light, and he gives the reason, so that the works will not be exposed. Not because of shame, because of exposure. So learn the difference between private and hidden. Private has a door. Hidden has a story ready. If a friendship, a conversation, or a habit needs to stay unmentioned around your spouse, your pastor, or your closest believing friend, the secrecy is not protecting the relationship, it is protecting the drift. Sixth, clarity keeps dissolving after you talk to them. Paul asks the Galatians one of the best questions in the Bible for this. You were running well, he says. Who cut in on you? The word he uses pictures someone stepping into a runner's lane and breaking their stride, and then he adds the part that settles it. This persuasion is not from him who calls you. Then, a little leaven works through the whole batch. You knew what to do on Sunday at noon. By Thursday you did not, and if you are honest, you can usually name the conversation that happened in between. God does convict, and he does correct, and he sometimes changes your mind. But God does not need manipulation to make you deny what wisdom has already shown you. And seventh, you are eventually asked to choose between pleasing them and obeying God. If you think you are too mature to be moved by this, look at Peter. In Antioch, he had been eating with Gentile believers freely. Then certain respectable religious men arrived, and he pulled back. Paul says he did it out of fear, calls it hypocrisy, and then adds the line that should keep all of us humble. Even Barnabas was carried along with it. It was not doctrine that moved Peter. It was seeding. He knew the truth, and social pressure from good church people rearranged his behavior anyway. And nobody in that room said a word about it until Paul did. So if someone forces you into that choice, notice what has already happened. They have decided that your obedience is negotiable. You do not have to announce a verdict on their soul to take that seriously. Now, what to do, because Scripture is not vague here. Solomon stacks 4 commands in one breath about a dangerous path. Avoid it. Do not go on it. Turn away. Pass on. That is escalation, not hatred. And most of the time, the first steps are small. So pray for the person by name, which is very hard to do while building a case against them. Have one honest conversation instead of 30 resentful thoughts. Reduce access before you consider ending anything, and get one wise believer involved before you make a decision you cannot reverse. This is not permission to delete your family or walk out on your marriage. And if what you are dealing with involves abuse, coercion, or danger to you or your children, that is not a discernment problem. Talk to your pastor, talk to a professional, and get to safety. Then run one last test and run it on yourself. Ask whether you are anyone's difficult influence, whether your presence makes obedience easier or heavier for the people near you. Discernment that only ever points outward has stopped being discernment. You do not need to become suspicious of everyone to protect your closeness with Christ. You just need to stop overriding what your own walk with God has already been telling you. If that is your prayer today, comment it. Lord, give me discernment, not as a formula and not to make you afraid of people, just as an honest prayer for wisdom, clarity, and the courage to obey. And if you want to keep growing in this kind of wisdom, subscribe and stay with us.